Welcome to the Destination Simple podcast. I'm Elizabeth. I'm a holistic personal chef and also a guide to finding more joy and ease in the kitchen. I'm joined by my co-host, Suzanne Goulden. She's an intentional living consultant, and she also writes a wonderful blog on her experiences with intentional living. We've launched the Destination Simple podcast to be a place where we can take our conversations online about our own experiences in experimenting with simplicity and intentional living in our real lives. We often have these conversations that leave us feeling really inspired, and we just wanted to take it out in the world so that you can also join the conversation, and maybe the seeds that we plant will be something that you go into in your own life in a way that fits for you. So Suzanne, this is our second podcast. Woo! Why don't you tell us what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. Hi, Elizabeth. It's so fantastic to be having this conversation with you today. So today our topic is based off of a personal essay that I wrote for my newsletter that I send out. So this is not based on one of my public blog posts. I do write a more personal essay for my newsletters, which you need to sign up for to get. But I decided today to share the essay I sent out in my most recent newsletter. And it's about setting routine. In particular, I'm talking about my mornings, but this would apply to, establishing routines that work for you. So I'll just go ahead and read the bit that I had sent out in my newsletter. It's called Starting on the Right Foot. I love slow mornings. My mornings are my time to start my day on the right foot. I try not to schedule anything before 10 a.m. I'll be at my desk working prior to that time, but I'm not ready for human interaction until I've gotten my day organized and have my direction figured out. Morning rush is just not me. This is something I used to fight against with myself. Must get up, must get going, should. And it just equals overwhelm and lack of focus, which means the work actually takes longer to complete. So I had a realistic chat with myself and determined what's best for me, and that is a slower morning with no rush. The flexibility, and flexibility in that schedule. It could mean I'm up early, or it could mean I didn't sleep well and I need some extra sleep in the morning. I find as I'm getting older, this sleep thing can be rather elusive. Being forgiving of myself and letting me get the rest I need has proven to make a more productive me. Trying to focus on writing a blog post when I'm tired will take me 3 times as long as when I'm rested and focused, so it's just not worth the rush. If there are areas in your life where you're feeling the crunch and overwhelm, I encourage you to have that realistic chat with yourself and figure out a plan that does work for you. It will likely go against the grain of society, and that's okay. You do you. It may take some trial and error, but being able to focus fully on whatever your goal is by being more flexible somewhere else is worth the effort. It saves time, energy, and overwhelm in the long run.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. It was a huge kind of, can't think of the word right now, but revelation, for me, when I finally just said, stop fighting it. I have the flexibility right now to be able to be more patient with myself and to be more or less structured in the morning. I still have my routine, but it just varies on what time it starts, and that just works out so much better for me. I wake up, I feel rested, and that was a big problem before, is if I don't feel rested, and then it's really hard to get motivated.
It takes 3 times as long sometimes to do a job, or you never quite complete the job if you're not really able at that moment to do it, right?
And the overwhelm,
and that's where procrastination can come into play too.
Exactly. And the overwhelm and the stress and everything, because now you're adding pressure to yourself that now you're supposed to be productive and you're not productive because you should be productive, but you can't just get going. And then, the procrastination, because now you're flustered and you don't know where, it stacks up, right? Everybody knows this story, it's meeting the expectations either of others from the outside or the pressures that you're putting on yourself, generally because you think there's pressure coming from the outside. But
yeah, whether it may or may not be there, right? It's perceived pressure
right.
or it's real pressure, but it is coming from the outside and sometimes draws us out of paying attention to our own needs or what might work best for us.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm talking specifically about my mornings here, but for somebody else, that might be an evening routine or an after work before supper routine, or I would say wherever it is that you feel a lot of pressure and less productivity, then that's the area where you kind of need to spend a little time thinking about how can you restructure it? What can you change? What can you let go of? That's probably the biggest thing, right? What is really unnecessary that you are adding to your routine that does not need to be there, and just starting to give yourself permission to let those pieces go.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that moment that you're talking about. So it might not be morning for everybody, or there's looking for the opportunity of where you might rework that. And you suggest looking at the place where it's extreme, where things feel really tight or overwhelming or like too much. And I think that's so interesting because that seems like the last place you can look at, but it is an indicator that there's a giant mismatch between what you need to feel better in that time and what you're expecting of yourself.
Right.
Or, what standard you're holding yourself to.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of brilliant.
That tension is really about the fact that they're way out of alignment. And so you're so right. That's the place to look.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what makes me excited is to actually look at that terrible time of the week or something and dare yourself to change it up, to go against the grain,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And to be able to stand up and say, this isn't working for me, so what do I need? What do I need right now? What is the self-care steps that I need? We tend to say, self-care so often is taking a break, having a nap, going for a bath, taking a walk, spending time in nature, these kinds of things, right? But self-care is also times like this. What is the chaotic moment? And what do you need to do for yourself in this moment? That is also self-care. It's not necessarily, well, my day is hectic, I'm just going to go have a nap. That's not necessarily the way it's going to work. That's not realistic.
But that's actually hitting me in the feels. Like that is, it's so true. Sometimes self-care is just holding yourself when things are hard and giving yourself a bit of grace, being patient, or trying to be, a little less rigid with yourself and a little more listening to what's needed in that for you to feel better in that moment. And I think that's so excellent.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, you're right. It's about, you said listening to yourself. I think we can add to that acknowledging, right? It's so often that we are just going through the motions, just going through the steps, just, I call it following the herd, right? Like cattle, or doing what society expects of us, or what your spouse or your parents or your whoever expects of you, and you end up falling into these traps of pressure because of what you perceive from the outside. And what you need in that moment is to just acknowledge, I am overwhelmed right now. I'm stressed. I'm tense. I'm flustered. I'm whatever. Acknowledge the feeling, acknowledge that emotion, and say, what do I need? And that answer might not come immediately, but the first step is to acknowledge that you're in that state, right? Because otherwise you just stay flustered and you keep going because this is what's expected of us. This is what you've always done.
Oh, yeah.
And, and this is where you need to stop and say, hold on a second. I need 30 seconds, and if you're not sure what to do in that moment, breathe, stop and breathe, because what you're probably lacking is oxygen, right? Take some deep breaths, get some oxygen to your brain. That helps you to settle your nervous system, settles the brain, right? And then you're able to focus better. So, the 30 seconds is not going to make or break you hitting a deadline, right?
Yeah.
Take 3 to 5 slow breaths and just settle yourself, right?
And then how much, after we do something like that, or after I do something like that, I feel better about how I'm going to think about this challenge in front of me, or this moment where there's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And now just going back to this listening to yourself, and I think there's a couple things that might happen. You're saying sometimes the answer is not there right away, and you can take your breaths, and I completely agree. And sometimes your gut says maybe what the answer is, and maybe you don't want to believe it, right? Like, I'm thinking about times when we've had too much on the go as a family with kids, and I try to be intentional about activities and things like that, but there are weeks where you're just like, this is crazy, and no one's having a good time.
Yeah.
And there was a point this spring where things were too busy and the kids were not enjoying getting in the car and going to their lessons. And neither was I. But the last thing I thought I could do was quit, drop the lessons, right? It was like, no, kids should take something, right? Blank. And my expectation is that it might not even be a conscious expectation, but you're sort of thinking, well, they should always be in one thing, just one thing. But there are times in life we had a busy winter and we needed some weeks with nothing.
Yeah.
And I realized I was feeling that. And, you don't want to believe it, or you think it's not possible to just drop all the stuff you're signed up for, everything you said yes to. But we did. And we had some weeks where there was just less to do, just the basics, right? We were just doing the basics and they felt really good. Yeah. And the kids were happier to be at home in the evenings, right? They just want to hang out with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was really nice. So I think sometimes your gut might say, I can't do this volunteer position, or, this extra thing I've taken on at work, or going to the gym early in the morning. It's just, I can't. But we hold ourselves to that. Like, no, I have to be what I said I was going to do. And that's where it starts to feel kind of yucky. So maybe it's listening to that part that is already kind of whispering to you what you want.
Exactly. I fully agree with that. And the first part of that, though, that you said was acknowledging and realizing the truth. Nobody's enjoying this, including the kids, right? And this is who we're doing this for, right? This is who we're doing this for. I always kind of worry about, the families when you hear their kids are in something every day of the week. And they've got more than one kid, and they've got enlisted all the relatives to help drive. And did anybody ask the kids if they want to? I mean, they're going to say, yes, I want to play these sports, and yes, I want to be in art class, and yes, I want to take music, and yes, because they're interested and excited. But when the reality settles in, are we checking in with them to say, how are you feeling? Like, are you feeling overwhelmed? Because if you're busy every day of the week, when do you have time to practice your instrument? When do you have time to practice whatever skills from your sports that you're supposed to be kind of, if you want to better yourself, usually it's not just doing things during class, right? You're supposed to be. So how much time do your kids have too after school and on weekends? I knew somebody when my kids were very small. My kids are adults now, but when my kids were very small, and I knew somebody who had I think it was a 8-year-old, 7-year-old in hockey. And the only time that they could get rink time for that team was 6 a.m. Saturday morning. So they were up at 5 a.m. Saturday morning to get their kid to the rink for 6 a.m. And I was like, really? Like, you want to get up that early on a Saturday morning? Does your kid want to get up that early on a Saturday morning? And I decided right then and there, my kids, they don't need hockey. We are not desperate enough to do that, you know? And my kids did other things. And then, you know, I had other kids, we were foster parents. I had other kids when they wanted to play hockey, we did rec hockey once a week. You know, I know everybody thinks their kid's going to be at NHL. That's not, you know, I had kids tell me that I was denying them the opportunity to be hockey players professionally. It's fine. You got to play hockey once a week and it suited everybody's schedule. It was right for us, you know? But the thought of getting up 5 a.m., I'm obviously not a morning person, as you can see that I read this, you know, this morning, that early morning things is not my thing. You know, I've got a friend who goes to the gym and has, you know, the 5 a.m. club. I'm like, 5 a.m. club? Are you crazy? I'm obviously not that person, right? I am not that person who's setting my alarm for 3 and 4 in the morning so I can be up and ready. But what I think a lot of people don't necessarily talk about or acknowledge is that the people who are getting up for, you know, that time of the day, what is their evening routine? Because they're not going to bed at midnight. If they are, they've got more energy than anybody I know. But, you know,
I think it's worth realizing that there are different types of people, right?
Yes.
Like, and so you can't read an article that says like, oh, the highest achievers are at the gym at 5 a.m. And if you're not, you're just not going to become anything.
That's right.
And then, because at the same time, there's an article that says like, oh, the world's top earners sleep in, don't get started till 11, or they take care of their own needs first, right? So there's all kinds. But I think all too often we've held ourselves to the standard that, let's say early mornings is a good example, that we have to get up, get going, be efficient in the morning in order to become something, right? And we can challenge that because we all have gifts to bring to the world that we will do in our own way when we are in tune with our own rhythm. You know, and of course, there's other ways of working that we can learn and change. But yeah, you don't have to join the 5 a.m. club because it works for a 5 a.m. person.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, the main message is, you know, that I was kind of trying to get across with this is that you have to do what's right for you, regardless of what Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is that you're on is telling you that the people, and it's probably even the people you look up to, right? The people that you follow, what are they doing? And, you know, how are they doing it? And you've got the experts out there telling you how they do it, right? I mean, even we're telling you how we do it, but our message and what I really am always trying to make clear with my blog posts and with my messaging is this is how I'm living with intention. This is how I'm simplifying my life. This is the journey I'm on. And this is how I do it. But you do you. If you get inspiration from something that I've said, if I've planted a seed and you're thinking on it, but maybe it's not quite sitting right for you, twist it and turn it, you know, flip it upside down, look at it from all sides and say, how does this fit in my life? Does this fit in my life? Maybe this part of it is just not for me. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Move on.
Right now, or, you know, this isn't the part you're wanting to work on right now. But it is an idea to look at, you know?
Yeah.
And I just want to get back to the busy family things because you're at the other end of that. I'm kind of going into it
Right.
as my kids get older. And I think one of the things, you know, with regard to intentionality is if we are putting our family in all kinds of things and the schedule's packed, are we making room for other values in our life, the important, meaningful things, right? So we can sometimes put a lot of emphasis on activities or doing, right?
Yep.
And do we put emphasis on, and we can through intentional living, put emphasis on time for the other important things for us. So that might be time for family, that might be family meals, that might be cooking. Of course, that's something that's dear to my heart, is the time with food and nourishing food. Is it meal prep? Maybe it's not, but is it cooking during the week? How are we feeding ourselves? How are we taking care of the balance of all of the pieces of wellness for ourselves and for maybe a family if we have one? And that's where things can get out of balance, right?
Exactly.
So you put all your eggs in a basket or two of activity and doing and busyness, and the other things fall to pieces. And so, you and I talk a lot about how to bring that back into balance, into something that feels manageable and feels like good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, maybe you do have a kid that's really passionate about a sport. That's awesome. And you might be in a place where you want to put them in everything to do with that, succeeding in that space. And also, some kids do really well doing something once a week or seasonally, and they might still be a high achiever in that space.
That's right.
Because there's less stress about it. They don't get burnt out going to 5 practices a week or getting up at 5 a.m., so let it feel good.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is a really key thing too, and that is listen to the kid, listen to the person who's doing the activity. Are they getting energy from being involved a lot, or are they losing energy from being overstimulated? Right?
Yes,
So,
that is the essence of it.
Yeah. So, maybe your kid, obviously there's NHL players out there and they are obsessed with hockey their whole life. This is how they got there. I understand that, right? And maybe you've got the kid that is energized. I just want to play hockey every day. This is my passion. This is what I love. And then you find a way, you help make that happen for that child, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the other kid who's like, I just want to play something for fun, right?
And that kid might be showing you that.
I just like to play with my friends. I just like to scrimmage, Okay, right? We kind of had the same thing in our home where you could do, one or two things depending on what they were. For each kid, I had one that was in Scouts and played guitar. I had one that sang. I had one that played hockey in the winter and then baseball in the summer, right? It was all kind of, but it was that you get to pick kind of per season and, what does this look like? And then also the overall picture, how busy are we as a family and who is doing the driving and how are you getting there and how far away is it and how often is it during the week? Scouts can be surprisingly busy. It's not once a week. It can be, but it's not, by the time they add in their weekend excursions and their fundraisers and their jamborees and all, it's surprisingly, wow, okay, that's shockingly busy. And that, but it worked out fine. But you have to evaluate what is right for your kids, but also works for you as kind of the manager of making these things happen. But I would say we have to be very careful about projecting onto our kids what we want them to do, right? Sometimes it can be our dream from when we were a child that we wanted fill in the blank, right? Whatever we're using hockey. We wanted to play hockey. So we project that onto our kids, right? So, well, you must want to play hockey because mom or dad wanted to play hockey, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got a child who is now caught in pleasing mom or dad, expectations, feeling like they don't have a choice. So it's communication and listening and being respectful of kids making decisions too. I think lots of times we forget that, that they have a say, right? We assume because we're adults that we know better. We know, we're making the decisions. And because when they were very little, we made all the decisions, and then it's growing and letting them make their decisions as they get older. We kind of get caught up in maybe forgetting and not listening. And maybe if you have the overachiever child who really wants to do these things and you're not ready to commit, that's part of a conversation too, right? Maybe you've got the kid that wants to do something every day of the week. Okay, are those opportunities there? But now maybe can you enlist some help so that you're not doing all of the driving, and that if you need a break, but the kid doesn't, the kid is thriving, and you're willing to pay for the opportunity, because all these things cost money too, right? That's a whole other conversation. But if you can make it happen, but you need to enlist some help, right?
And in doing that, I think you're modeling being kind to yourself, and you're modeling your own values of taking care and self-care and having boundaries around how you're going to spend your time and energy.
Right.
So I want to also turn this conversation, like I think as parents, we've taken it down the how we do it as parents, but let's turn it back to an individual who maybe wants to do, like you described in your newsletter, find time for slowness, or, find time to turn down the heat in a certain area of their life.
Yeah. So I would say that, kind of going back to our kind of original discussion, which was looking for the areas where you're feeling stressed, right? And how can you change up those moments to balance them out? And
I really liked how you talked about some of the values that you used, or maybe principles of intentional living that you used in that moment when you realized you're going to rework this part of your life. I think you said patience, and there was another one, but those are so key.
Probably forgiveness, patience, and giving yourself permission to do these things. And irregardless of, we always talk about what society thinks and what the outside world thinks, but you have a spouse. Right?
Like, what do they think?
You might have somebody in your own house who is like, what do you mean you're not setting your alarm anymore?
Oh, so did you used to set your alarm and get out of bed? Yeah.
And it's not that I don't have an alarm now, but I do. It depends on what's on my schedule for the morning. And sometimes I feel through reading what I read here, and through what people are like, so you're in bed till 11, must be nice. This is not it at all. It's also part of the evening routine of going to bed at a reasonable time, so that I am up in the morning. I'm still up in the morning, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm at my desk long before 10 o'clock, right? It's just 10 o'clock is, if I'm making an appointment somewhere or with someone or a call, like nothing's happening before 10, right? I need to know
that alone is really awesome, because that's your time before 10 to not people. I'm an introvert, so I love this. But I think for anybody,
me too.
You need somewhere in your day or your week where it's safe from everything out there, and it's your time, and you're going to approach it without, the noise and the expectations from the outside world. And then at, say, 10 a.m., that's open time. And that's when you might start answering emails or taking calls. But how nice to have boundaries, especially for people that work from home, or like I work for myself. And I've tested out different types of boundaries on where work stops and starts. And so for you, and I'm like you actually, before 10, probably don't want to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And because there's lots of time for peopling at the other
Yeah.
parts of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just find like if I call, somewhere and they want to make an appointment and they're like, well, we have an opening at 8:30. I'm like, oh, how about anything later? Like, I know you're busy,
Uh-huh.
but you got anything like 10:30?
Yeah.
And usually they say yes. Actually, it's okay to say that's a little early for me,
Yeah.
Um, and of course there's times where they're like, well, yeah, but we're into next week. Okay, well, then I guess I'm getting up
Yeah.
early this
Yeah.
time. I mean,
It'd be very-
nothing is
Yeah.
hard and fast, nothing is
Yeah.
set in stone. I've really learned that being flexible is necessary as part of routine, and those two things really don't go together, but I've had to force them to be together and accept,
Mm.
because for me, if I have routine and something hiccups my routine, and I've talked about this before, something hiccups my routine, I lose my routine. And if I apply flexibility to my routine, then, okay, today hiccuped, but
Mhm.
tomorrow is a fresh start with flexibility. It didn't ruin my whole routine. I just got derailed today, right? Or this
Yeah.
week or whatever.
See, if you're listening to this podcast, this is why I have always loved talking to Suzanne, because she offers these different ways of looking at something. And there's so much value in what you're saying there. They don't seem to go together. I can't be flexible and have a routine. You can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had to. That's part of my burnout recovery, and that was part of my lessons in intentional living. And because coming out of burnout recovery, you have good days and bad days for a long time, and you have days that you're exhausted for days at a time, and then you have days where you had 3 days, 5 days a week of really good energy and thinking, oh, I'm getting better and I'm feeling better, and boom, you overdid it and you crash and you're back to square one again.
Yeah.
I had no choice but to learn flexibility and forgiveness for myself, and being able to say, this is a healing process. It's going to be slow, and it's not going to happen overnight. And you're going to be patient with yourself. And if you need a day of nothing, you do a day of nothing. I had the flexibility of being able to do that, and now here I am a year and a half later, and I'd say I'm pretty much back to the person I was before, but even better now, because I've learned so many lessons along the way that, I'm a much more calm, pleasant, less stressed person to be around, And so
I mean, it's a whole
I'm
topic,
better.
but it is a lot about managing energy in burnout or recovering from burnout. It's extreme. And then once you sort of feel better, more recovered, still it's about managing energy every day. So if you have something really big on one weekend, you might be tired on Monday. So it's like, well, what's that week going to look like?
Exactly.
So that I can absorb, what I put out that weekend for, it's grad. Lots of people are having grad things right now, or weddings, or, a work event or something. And I have gotten better at learning that I'm going to need the other kind of time to pair with the high energy times, just to recover. And beyond that, I mean, women's cycles mean that we're also not fully energized every single day of the month, right? Learning to work with that. And I think what you're talking about, even with allowing slower time, slower mornings, slower days, that is another way we can work with the energy of our cycles through the month or whatever it is.
And I saw, I can't remember, I apologize, I don't remember which company it was that kind of did this campaign, but it really spoke to me. And it was the message that women are expected to, take a pill, not the pill, but I mean, pain pill, for discomfort, and, get on your bike and go swimming and go horseback riding and
Yeah.
and you're supposed to live your normal life through this time period where you feel super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
For some women,
You're
it's
so
very
tired
extreme,
maybe, or,
and yeah,
different.
like it's
Yeah.
all the symptoms, right? Whether you're
Hmm.
doubled in half from cramping, or,
Hmm.
uncomfortable, or you're irritated and grumpy, whatever it is. So some of the symptoms are super mild, but you just might feel off or not yourself, or, there's something, you know, um, and this this message came out with, what if you just took a break that week? Like, who
Yes.
says you have to
Yes.
who says you have to be on your bike and go horseback riding and go swimming and
Yeah.
be active? Your body is telling you it
Hmm.
needs to rest. I remember when I first started learning about yoga years ago, and there was a general rule in yoga that you don't do yoga during your period. And I was like, why not? You can exercise, you can do all this stuff. But the message was, because your body just needs to rest during
Yeah.
that time,
Yeah.
right?
And how different is the energy that, say, that week when energy's a little lower, when you're forcing your body to do what it did the week before? Maybe it's more cardio or whatever, but like that high energy stuff on a week when you just can't do it, your body is just not, I believe, going to benefit as much when you're just kind of forcing yourself to be there. Sometimes there's certainly movement or exercise that will make you feel better and that will help with the pain, but it might not be as high intensity. So holding ourselves to that isn't that helpful,
That's right. And
possibly.
so that brings back the idea of flexibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel today? And it's not necessarily that you're going to be off for a week. Maybe you're off for a day. Maybe you're off for 2 days, whatever. What is your body telling you that it needs right now? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I was kind of early on in my burnout healing, I learned that if I was exhausted at the thought of doing something,
Yeah.
I didn't do it. That
Yeah.
I said I knew. And that was one of the measuring tools that I used throughout my healing, was how much further apart those feelings of exhaustion and overwhelm grew as I was able to say yes to more things, where I didn't
Yeah.
have that overwhelmed feeling. I could go and do more stuff,
Yeah.
right? And now
Mm-hmm.
it's I would say, actually, I haven't had that feeling, for a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months now, of having to say no to something, because just no,
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
this is
Just
not
no.
happening. I'm gonna now
Maybe we should call this episode Just No. Just
no.
No.
Yeah, just no. Just no. Yeah, no.
But it's true. When I was in burnout the first time, um, and I just was like, felt like I was at the bottom, and I realized somewhere that I had to just stop everything, basically, right? And including yoga, which was something that I had enjoyed before, and which we think of as being like this hallmark of well-being, and it's a practice that should help. But in that moment, it just felt like doing, like it's just a thing. And I just couldn't. And it's so ironic, right? But I gave it up for years. But I wouldn't even say gave it up. Like, with all these things, you might continue to ask yourself, is this something that I feel like doing? Like, this is part of burnout recovery, or becoming more in tune with yourself, or intentional living. Do I want to go to that class with my friend? No. But someday it might be yes. So it's not like I gave it up and thought I'm never going back to it. Um, I just knew that with all things burnout recovery, you can go back to anything when you get the yes nudge from your gut, right? And you don't have to go if you're feeling the no. Like,
Yeah,
it's just listening.
I think
Yeah.
that's a great message, is to not
Mm-hmm.
be closing doors. You know,
Yeah.
you're gently shutting them
For
while you're
now.
in recovery,
Yeah.
but they're never locked. you know, and they might open just a crack once in a while, and then you close them again because you weren't ready, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually
Yeah.
you can open those doors again.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, or not. Maybe you realize that what you thought was serving you isn't serving you. And
Yeah.
then you can
Yeah.
close the door and say, you know what, now we can put that door away. You
Yeah.
know,
Or
pull it
what I
out.
found,
There
also
you
what
go.
I found, you know, with something like yoga, it has a lot to do with being in tune and intentionality. And so part of the practice for me was to actually not go to a movement yoga class, but to practice the principles of self-care or not harming, you know, and like becoming more in line with my energy at the time. And that was really helpful. So I
Yeah.
felt like, you know what, I'm not actually giving it up. It might not look like I do yoga, but I'm doing it inside.
Yeah. which is fine. And sometimes you think, you know what, maybe it's not even having to go to a class,
There's
right?
so many ways to do things.
There's so many yeah, like there's lying poses in
Yes.
that you know, and maybe you do that in bed.
Yeah.
And that's
Or
your yoga,
breath work.
you
Breath
know,
work. Like you were
just
saying,
breath.
take the breaths or
Yeah.
just sit and
Or
listen.
if you don't want movement yoga, pick your favorite poses and just go into a hold, right? Go into the pose and just hold. And then go into another pose and hold. You don't always have to be doing the flow of one pose into the next, into the next, into the next. By the way, a little secret on that I will share. They don't show you that they all adjust their bodies. It's not such a smooth flow from one position to another to another. They are constantly making adjustments, shuffling their feet, moving their hips, moving their hands.
Yeah.
It is not as smooth. I mean, yes, it's graceful, but but they are making adjustments. You know, don't feel like why can't, because I have these videos that I do yoga with, and I was always like, how do they do that? Then I realized it's all in the editing. They cut out and then they reposition the camera, and it's like, wait a minute, they're doing what I'm doing. They just make it look good on TV, right? Yeah. And it's
we don't want lives that look good on TV, right? Like, we have real lives. And so getting back to the newsletter,
little side there.
Exactly. To the essay you wrote. I think my experience with that right now is more evenings. So I have been practicing, and it's not always easy or doable, right? Mornings are a little busy at my house because the kids, they just set the tone. But in my space right now, sometimes it's the best thing for me is to say, well, after 5-ish, or, you know, at 5, we start moving towards supper time and then evening space. And so I don't work now in the evenings, you know, or I try not to. So way more often than not, won't open my computer in the evenings, where I used to work in the evenings because that was all available work time, you know? Yeah. And it's hard to challenge your belief that you're not doing it, that you're doing enough, that you'll be successful, that you're worthwhile, you know, if you're not answering emails or producing something all the time. And I think it's sort of the other side of what you're saying about mornings is like, I need that time so that I can reset for activity, for work, for doing. You need both. You need to sharpen the saw, like they say, right? So you need time to step back, sharpen the saw, because you can't just continuously saw through trees without your blade getting dull. So anybody listening, like we all need this time in our day or our week or our month. And what you wrote was so helpful to think about, and, you know, just sort of like a confession from you, like, hey guys, guess what?
Yeah. You know, I
love that.
I kind of realized that sometimes we get so caught up in what other people expect of us, and then, oh, if they knew the truth, what comments are they going to make? right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're afraid of, is we're afraid of I'm gonna send out this newsletter and someone's gonna email me back and say, so you sleep until 11 every day? Because
Yeah.
that's not what I said, but I can understand after
Yeah.
reading it a few times and kind of going, well, it could sound like that's, oh, must be
Yeah.
nice, right?
Yeah.
And but what if I did? What if I
Yeah.
did?
That person might want to.
Like, what if you're not a morning person at all? I consider myself to be the in-between person, right? I'm not a night hawk and I'm not an early morning person. I'm right in the middle,
Hmm.
I go to bed between 10 and midnight and I'm up between 7 and 9. Like,
Hmm.
that's kind of there it is, right?
Hmm.
Oftentimes though, and I don't know about, you out there, anybody listening, but once I turned 40, sleep started to be like,
Evaporate.
what the heck?
Yeah.
you know, and you
Yeah.
start waking up in the middle of the night and you're up for 2 hours, and it's like, okay, and you're waiting for sleep to come. And then sometimes by the morning, it's like, I am not ready at 7 to get up
Yeah.
and get started on my day. Today is a 9 a.m. day because I lost 2 hours of sleep in the
Yeah.
middle of the night. I need
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. So being
But
gentle and with yourself and acknowledging and recognizing the need
yeah,
and the feeling.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, kind of back to what I was saying with the sending out this email, like you said, it's kind of like a real life thing. And I thought, if I'm willing to put myself out there and say, this is what I am doing, and it might go against the grain, I'm giving other people permission to go against the grain, right? And if somebody
Hmm.
wants to email me back, which nobody did, but if somebody wants to email me back and say, this is terrible because you should, that at this point rolls off my back,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You can
It's,
say what you need to say,
yeah.
and because I know the journey I've been on, I know
Hmm.
the hardship I've been through, and I know what helped me resolve it. And all that, I'm talking about burnout, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I am very strong in the lessons that I learned and what message I want to put out to you,
Hmm.
to say there's a better way, and it's not my way, it's
Yeah.
your way, right?
Yeah.
It's your way.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
you need to listen to your body, you need to listen to your mind, you need to learn to listen to signals. And the thing is, we have ignored those signals for so long that I actually think that that's why we end up in burnout, is we're ignoring the signals. We're not making the changes. We know
Yes.
we're getting more stressed, more overwhelmed, more
Yeah.
exhausted, more of everything, but we just don't know how to stop.
Yeah.
If we could learn to stop before getting to the stage of burnout by putting
Hmm.
the brakes on before, and if you've been able to do that, all the power to you,
Hmm.
but it
It's so
almost
many,
seems,
so it's almost universal.
yeah,
I would say in my communities that we're not doing that naturally.
no,
We are pushing ourselves beyond, and it's hard to say no to things. It's hard to say no to things that you want to do, but there's only so much time and there's only so much energy, and you want to nurture relationships. You want to have time to breathe, to eat, and there's only the time that you have. So I found it really helpful to start saying no to things that just don't quite fit the schedule or the time that I have, even if it's like, oh, that's something I would really like, but there's only a few things I can say yes to right now, you know,
yeah, yeah, and being able
so
to
that I can
learn,
focus on those and go in a little deeper.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
think we teach ourselves, and it probably happens from childhood, or teen years, 20s, early on,
Hmm.
that we start ignoring our body signs and our own mental health signs that we
Hmm.
need to stop. And I think it's a lot to do with the outside expectations or our perceived outside expectations that we can't say no. I mean, you think going through high school, peer pressure. It doesn't matter what a teenager should do for themselves, and I'm going to use the word should, listening to themselves, listening to what's right for them. If their friend so much as winces an eye or arches an eyebrow, they crumble down to, what did you want me to do? I just stepped out of line. I don't fit in. Right. And I don't honestly, that is totally out of my realm to crack that nut, but if we could, teach our kids the confidence, to do what's right for them. But, going through those kinds of years with the peer pressure, as soon as their pressure is no longer from mom and dad, now it's what do my friends think? That's a total other animal, to deal with. But I think that's where we definitely learn to stop listening to ourselves, right? It happens in our childhood. It happens from a young age, that we turn off. The same thing really, I mean, maybe a bit of a side note here, but the same thing happens with eating, right? I mean, we don't eat when we're hungry. We have turned off the signal that our body gives us to stop when we've had enough to eat. We ignore that now, right? So we don't eat when we're hungry, and we don't stop when we're satisfied.
And I would add, we don't, sometimes we don't eat when we're hungry. Like sometimes we're not stopping to eat and nourish and be present with eating too. So sometimes we've turned off the full feeling, but also sometimes we're not paying attention to when we're hungry and undernourished.
Exactly.
It's both.
It is. It's both sides because we're busy. So either we eat on routine, hungry or not, right? And I mean, what are we supposed to do? I mean, our hands are kind of tied as a family. Well, you made supper, you're eating supper at 6 o'clock. Well, it doesn't matter if you're hungry or not. Are you eating your supper, right? So just through the way of our routines and family makeup and our how we are set up is it turns off our signals that are naturally there to eat or to not eat, or we're too busy and we ignore the signals that we need to eat, right?
Until we eat whatever we can find.
Or we eat on the go. So we don't take the time to sit and give our digestion a chance to do its work. We're walking and eating, driving and eating at our desk and working at the same time, that kind of thing, eating in front of the TV. That's mindless eating, right? Where you're not paying attention to your food. And this is, kind of where we end up. And so even learning to listen to those signals and learning what your body signals are, because different people get different signals from their body when they're hungry.
And this does tie really well to where we started the conversation, which is you were listening to the signals of your body and listening to yourself about what mornings needed to be like for you to feel better. And it's the same practice when it comes to food and mindful eating, is to slow down enough to listen to the signals and to pay attention to them, or learn to begin listening. It doesn't come naturally all the time because we're so habituated.
We don't
to
even
other
know
ways.
we don't even know what the signals are that our body gives us, right? And that's something where you have to be really in tune with. There's a whole list of signals that your body might give you, and it's different for each person. For myself, my stomach may growl, or I get a headache, but I also get a headache when I'm tired. So when I get a headache, I have to figure out, and then when I'm stressed. So when I get a headache, I have to figure out, when was the last time I ate? So is this a hunger headache? Does this mean I need to go have a nap? Or, am I super stressed right now and this is a tension headache? What kind of headache am I dealing with? When I've had enough to eat, my body sighs. But it's like so simple and so, I'll call it minor, that if you're not paying attention, right,
Yeah.
then you miss it and you keep eating
Wow.
and now you're over
Wow.
full, right?
Yeah.
But somebody else might not sigh, but somebody else might have a different signal that their body, but if you don't pay attention and listen and learn because you're watching TV or you're eating on the run or you're distracted, you're going to miss the signal.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so I know when I sigh, it is time, that I should be putting the fork down, right? My body's had enough. And if I listen to that signal, I don't feel overfull. I feel very comfortable and I'm good. If I ignore that because, food tastes really good, then, I'm not going to feel so great later. Right.
Yeah.
But I know the sign, right? I know what it is. But that's something I paid attention to a long time ago through some other work. But but I mean, there's so it's bringing it back to the topic. I mean, that's asking yourself, are your meal times hectic? Is this a time of overwhelm for you? Is this a time where you need to say, hey, maybe this is something I need to pay attention to? How can I take 10 or 15 minutes to actually just sit with my food?
Yes.
How can I, maybe that's your priority in your day. Maybe you're in rush hour traffic regularly and you find it super stressful. And if you're in your car yelling at other drivers for half an hour, 45-minute drive home, you're not relaxed and ready to walk into your house. You're angry and you might not realize it by the time you get home. But if I have found that switching my music to something super calming can totally change the drive, and,
so maybe that's a space where someone could try to shift, right? You only really need to find that one space where you might want to try making a change, right? We don't need to rework the whole life. It's just finding a little place to practice and play with it.
Yeah. And I mean,
because it's addictive. Once you start getting it, you're going to want to do it in all the areas of your life, right?
Yeah, it does. It definitely travels from one space to the next very quickly. Once you flip the switch, sorry.
Yeah. If something
man,
feels
it really
good,
does start to feel good in different areas. Like if you're, that drive home is half an hour, 45 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change because you're yelling at the car in front of you or, the guy that cut you off or the person behind you is too close, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the same every day. So stop fighting it. And if it's that bad for you, maybe you need to find another job or talk to your boss about changing your hours to be more flexible so you can drive outside of those rush times. But if that's the time you're in rush hour, the reality is you're in rush hour. Slow down. And I don't mean physically in your car necessarily. I just mean in your brain, in your mind. Traffic is slow. Is it easier to accept that? Maybe that's when you find, a podcast to listen to or,
this is the Destination Simple podcast.
Exactly.
Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast.
Or, maybe that's when you're breathing. Right. And you're focused on it's stop and go traffic. That's the time when you're unwinding from your day so that by the time you get home, you've put your day away and you're ready to take on whatever's at home waiting for you. Because that's going to be a whole other set of stresses, And so maybe it's just resetting your mindset around that drive. Maybe the drive is fine and maybe it is absolute chaos when you walk in the house. And kids have to be somewhere, dinner needs to be made and there's rush, and you're throwing in processed food into the oven because that's quick and easy. Maybe that's where you need to sit down with yourself and say, when I walk into the house, what do I need? Where do I need to put some work in? Where do I need to cut things out? Whatever questions you need to ask yourself to make this time of day pleasant. I want to walk into my house and feel good about seeing my family.
Ooh, I feel like that's a whole podcast in itself, actually, because that is such a space for practicing. So, what can we simplify what's going to be happening in the house? And how can we be intentional about how we enter? Anyway, we won't talk too much on that because that might be a future podcast episode. And I do want to say, so we're building on this essay that Suzanne emailed out on slow mornings. And she also has a great blog post on 15 like real life self-care things you can try. And it's also inspiring. So maybe we'll link to that in the show notes under this episode, because it's also a helpful read if you're feeling like there's a place you want to explore a different way of that time feeling.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like we could talk about this for another hour.
Another hour. I know, but we will wrap it up for today. We just always want to hear from the people who are listening in on our conversations here. We welcome you. We want to hear from you. We do have a link to our email, in the show notes. And if you have questions, comments, if you have things that you'd like to hear us talk about, maybe you have a situation that you want to share with us, we can, share it with us, and we're more than happy to see if we can work it into a future episode. I'd love to hear from you and engage with us. For sure. We'd love to get to know you as our listeners and see, who's checking us out.
Yeah. All right. Nice chatting with you.
Nice chatting with you too.
Talk to you soon.
We'll talk to you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.